I'm pretty sure we've all played Lego Marvel Superheroes before, and we've all had that moment where we've been looking through the roster or switching between characters, and we've seen someone who has made us go, who the hell is that guy? Well, today I'm going to solve that issue, because I will be explaining every single character in Lego Marvel Superheroes. So, let's start off with the ones everyone knows and loves, like Spider-Man. Just before we do that, I want to say this video took ages to make and required hours of research and editing, so I'd really appreciate if you guys let me know if you liked it by liking and subbing. Apart from that, enjoy the video. Spider-Man is arguably one of, if not Marvel's most iconic superheroes, being created by Stan Lee and first appearing in Amazing Fantasy issue 15. His real name is Peter Parker, and he's typically depicted as a nerdy high schooler. Spider-Man got his powers when he was bitten by a radioactive spider. His powers are being able to stick and crawl on walls, enhance agility, and his spider sense. He also has superhuman durability and super strength. He is so strong to the point that he can pick up cars, and actually once killed Wolverine's girlfriend with one punch. Spider-Man is also able to shoot and swing from webs that come from his web shooters, which he designed himself, showing just how smart he is. All these things help him fight villains in New York, but we'll get to those guys later. Iron Man's real name is Tony Stark, and he is a
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
who owns Stark Industries. He created his first Iron Man suit after he was captured by terrorists in Afghanistan, so he created the suit to escape from his captors. After returning home, Tony decided he wanted to do good for the world, so he created the second Iron Man suit, which was much more advanced and powerful. The suit gives him the power of flight, the ability to shoot energy beams from his hands, and equips him with an arsenal of things like missiles and lasers. All of that helps in his fights against villains such as Ironmonger, the Melter, even Fin Fang Foom. Captain America or Steve Rogers first appeared in Captain America Comics issue 1, where he famously punched Hitler on the cover. Captain America was originally a small, scrawny kid who wanted to join the army. However, he was rejected from the army due to the fact that he was small and scrawny. So, he decided to join the Super Soldier program, thinking it would help him join the army. After being injected with the Super Soldier serum, Captain America's body was enhanced to the peak of human potential. This meant he was incredibly strong, fast, and durable, and fun fact, he also couldn't get drunk. Alongside his powers, he was given a shield made of vibranium, the strongest metal on Earth, which he could throw with precision. With his powers and shield, he fought against Hydra in World War II, eventually sacrificing himself to save the world and win the war. However, he did not die. Instead, he woke up decades later in the 21st century, where he continues to fight for justice. Wolverine was born in Canada and discovered his mutant powers at a young age, those being his claws and healing factor. Due to his mutant powers, Wolverine lived for many, many years, doing many different things such as being a soldier and being a mercenary. However, Wolverine didn't originally have the metal skeletons and claws that we know him for. Originally, they were just regular bones until he was captured by a secret government program called Weapon X. There, he was experimented on, and scientists bonded adamantium into his bones, making him nearly indestructible. The experiments left Wolverine with broken gaps in his memories, and eventually after escaping the Weapon X program, he found a home with the X-Men. Hulk's real name is Bruce Banner, and he originally worked as a scientist for the US government. However, one day during an experimental gamma radiation test, in order to save a young boy's life, Banner sacrificed his life and absorbed a large amount of gamma radiation. The gamma radiation altered his DNA, so that whenever Bruce Banner feels strong emotions, especially anger, he transforms into the Hulk, the strongest creature alive. Originally, he couldn't control the transformation, so it was difficult for the world to call him a hero. However, as time went on, he learned to control his emotions. When he transformed, he was able to use his powers and strength for good. So, now that we've got what I consider the big five of Marvel out the way, let's continue with the rest of the roster, who you may or may not know about, and give a more detailed explanation. So, first up, Abomination is one of Hulk's greatest enemies. His real name is Emil Blonsky, and he started out as a KGB agent sent to infiltrate the US government and learn the secrets of Bruce Banner's gamma experiments. After seeing what radiation did to Bruce, Emil intentionally exposed himself to gamma radiation to make himself stronger. However, the gamma radiation turned him into a reptilian-like monster, and unlike the Hulk, the Abomination's transformation was permanent, meaning he couldn't return to human form. Like the Hulk, the Abomination has super strength and durability, but he also doesn't require oxygen and can swim underwater. Now for the most useless character in the game. The Absorbing Man's real name is Carl Creel, and he started off his life as a boxer and criminal, before Loki hired Creel to help him fight against Thor. In order to give Creel a chance against Thor, Loki gave him some magic elixir, which is what gave Absorbing Man his powers, which are that he can absorb the physical properties of whatever he touches. Not only can he turn himself to steel, but he can also absorb gamma radiation to become like the Hulk. AIM agents are members working for the secret organization of AIM, who believe that advanced technology is the path to world domination. Aldrich Killian was a scientist who was working on Project Extremis, which was essentially the next generation of the super soldier serum. However, Aldrich Killian stole and sold Extremis to terrorist groups, believing global conflict would accelerate human evolution. After finding this out, Iron Man stopped and defeated Aldrich Killian. Ant-Man, or Hank Pym, was originally a scientist who discovered Pym particles, which are particles which can alter size and mass. Hank Pym then integrated these particles into a high-tech suit and became the hero Ant-Man, using his newfound abilities of shrinking and growing to fight crime. Ant-Man also has a cybernetic helmet, which allows him to communicate and control his army of ants. Through his superhero career, Ant-Man also went by names such as Giant Man, and at some point became evil and called himself Yellow Jacket. However, we'll talk about that later. Archangel was originally just called Angel, and was a mutant who had the ability to fly due to his angel-like wings. However, after an electrical accident, Angel lost his wings. This put him into a deep depression. During this low point, he was approached by the evil mutant Apocalypse, who told him he could save him, and Angel agreed, however it came at a cost. He worked for Apocalypse and became his horseman of death. And his wings, instead of being repaired, they were turned into sharp metal razors. His skin turned blue, and he became violent and evil, officially becoming the Archangel. Armin Zola was Hydra's top scientist during World War II. However, when Zola's body started failing due to poor health, he transferred his mind and consciousness into a robot body, which has a screen on its chest, projecting his face. Armin Zola is essentially immortal because he has no true physical form, so he keeps going back and clashing with Captain America and trying to revive Hydra. Aunt May is the widow of Ben Parker and acts as the mother and legal guardian of Peter Parker, due to his parents being dead. Depending on the adaptation, she may know Peter as Spider-Man and still supports him. However, Aunt May will always be Peter's moral compass and anchor. Agent Coulson is a high-ranking S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who works under Nick Fury. He acts as a recruiter of superheroes, and he especially helped during the original Avengers initiative. Beast's real name is Dr. Hank McCoy, and he is one of the original X-Men. His mutation causes him to be blue and furry, and he is also extremely agile, with large hands and feet. Hence why he earned the nickname Beast. Beast's mutation isn't just purely physical though, it also gives him a brilliant mind, making him the smartest member of the X-Men. Beta Ray Bill is a Corbinite from the planet Corbin. Unfortunately, the planet Corbin was destroyed, and in order to protect the remainder of his people, Beta Ray Bill underwent a dangerous transformation process to become his people's champion, hence why he looks like a horse and different to the rest of his race. In an encounter with Thor, Beta Ray Bill lifted Majonia and proved he is worthy of the honor of the gods. Rather than take Majonia, Odin forged Beta Ray Bill an axe called Stormbreaker, which has the same powers as Thor's hammer. Beetle's real name is Albert Jenkins. He was an aircraft mechanic who built himself a high-tech suit that he uses to rob banks and commit other crimes. Beetle would usually be in fights against Spider-Man, until eventually he joined the Thunderbolts, trying to move away from his criminal life. Beetle's suit was equipped with energy blasters, and had wings that gave him the ability to fly. Black Bolt is the king of the Inhuman race. He is also one of the most powerful Marvel characters. His voice is so loud and powerful that even a simple whisper could wipe out a mountain range. Due to this, Black Bolt communicates through sign language. Black Bolt is also a member of the Illuminati, a group of the world's most powerful heroes secretly pulling the strings behind the scenes. Black Cat's real name is Felicia Hardy, and she's a love interest, ally, and sometimes villain to Spider-Man, even in some timelines having a kid with him. Black Cat is a master thief who sometimes steals for good and sometimes steals for evil. Black Panther's real name is T'Challa, and he is the king of Wakanda, which is the nation in which Vibranium comes from. After becoming king of Wakanda, he took on the mantle of Black Panther and became the greatest warrior and protector of Wakanda. Black Panther's powers come from a combination of ancient rituals and a heart-shaped herb that he ate. This herb gave him superhuman speed and strength. On top of that, Black Panther's suit is also capable of absorbing and redirecting kinetic energy due to the advanced technology in Wakanda. Blade, or Eric Brooks, was born as a vampire due to his mother being bitten by one while she was pregnant with Blade. Unlike normal vampires, Blade was born with the rare traits of a Dathomir, meaning he has all the traits of a vampire, like superhuman speed and regeneration, but unlike a regular vampire, he is not affected by sunlight, which is how he earned the nickname, the Daywalker. Armed with a sword and 2 custom pistols, Blade hunts down vampires and protects the world from other supernatural threats like demons. Blob is an enemy of the X-Men and one of the original members of the Brotherhood of Mutants. Before he became a villain, he worked as a circus freak, when Professor X tried to recruit him to the X-Men. Although, Blob rejected the offer thinking he was more powerful and better than other mutants, leading him to become a villain. Blob's mutation is just that his body is extremely dense, meaning he can take hits that would normally kill people, making regular weapons and guns useless against him. It also makes him extremely strong. Bullseye is a skilled assassin and nemesis of Daredevil. His identity is kept relatively hidden, but it is known that he had a rough childhood. Bullseye doesn't have had any powers, however, he is so skilled and accurate that he can turn anything that can be thrown into a weapon, even a coin, though he prefers to stick to his throwing knives. Bullseye is also best known for being the man that murders Daredevil's love interest, Elektra, in a pivotal moment in the comics. Black Widow's real name is Natasha Romanoff, and as a child she was taken to a place called the Red Room, which was a top secret Russian program designed to raise and turn children into elite spies. Black Widow graduated from the Red Room as one of their best spies and went on to become a villain of Iron Man. She was sent to infiltrate America, but eventually she started questioning her orders and switched her allegiance, and this is when she joined S.H.I.E.L.D. and eventually became one of the founding members of the Avengers. Captain Britain's real name is Brian Braddock, and he gained his powers after touching the Amulet of Right. The amulet gave him super strength and enhanced speed and durability, which can increase depending on how close he is to the British Isles. Captain Britain is also a member of the Captain Britain Corps, which protects the multiverse. Behind the symbiote of Carnage is Cletus Cassidy, who is a homicidal serial killer. He becomes Carnage due to him sharing a cell with Venom, and when Venom escapes, he left behind a red symbiote, which merged with Cletus and amplified all of his psychotic feelings. Carnage has similar powers to Venom, however, they are much more unpredictable. He can climb on walls, shoot webs, and wall crawl. He can also shapeshift and turn his arms into weapons like axes. Unlike Venom, the symbiote has fused with Cassidy's bloodstream, making separation nearly impossible. Colossus' real name is Pyotr Nikolaevich Rasputin, and is one of the main members of the X-Men. He was born in Siberia, Russia, and worked on his family's farm. But one day, his mutation activated and his body turned to steel, scaring his family. Eventually after this happened, Professor X came and found him, and asked him to join the X-Men. Colossus accepted because he wanted to protect mutants, and he didn't want anyone to feel like how he did when his family abandoned him. Colossus' mutation gave him the ability to turn his skin to steel, making him nearly indestructible, and giving him strength that rivals that of the Things and the Hulk. Kurt Connors is a genius scientist, but before he was a scientist, he was a military surgeon and lost his arm during the war. After this, he dedicated his life to finding a way to get his arm back. He thought he could do this by recreating how a lizard generates its tail, so he made a serum that contained lizard DNA. Dr. Connors ended up testing it on himself, and ended up turning himself into a massive humanoid lizard. When in lizard form, Connor wants to eliminate the human population and turn them all into lizards. Luckily, he is normally stopped and cured by Spider-Man. Cyclops, or Scott Summers, is one of the founding members of the X-Men, and usually leads them. He is also one of the most important figures in mutant history. When Cyclops first got his mutant abilities, he became a threat to everyone around him, because he couldn't control his powers, and every time he opened his eyes, lasers would shoot out. This will change when Professor X convinced him to join the X-Men, and gifted him a visor made of ruby quartz, which allowed him to control his powers. Cyclops was so respected by mutants, he eventually came to be the head master of Professor X's academy, and on the Council of Krakoa, which eventually was the home of all mutants. This is a member of the Damage Control Organization, which is an organization which deals with and cleans up the mess that superheroes and superhero villains make. By day, Daredevil was a lawyer called Matt Murdock, but by night, he is a vigilante called Daredevil, protecting Hell's Kitchen. Either way, he is fighting for justice. When Daredevil was young, he saved a man from being run over by a truck. However, in the process, he was splashed with radioactive chemicals, causing him to go blind. However, all of his other senses were enhanced far beyond the average humans. He now has a biological radar which allows him to somewhat see the world around him through vibrations and sound. He uses these extraordinary abilities to stop crime lords like the Kingpin from taking over New York City. Deadpool was originally a mercenary called Wade Wilson. Eventually, he found out he had terminal cancer. Desperate for a cure, he joined the Weapon X program, the same organization that experimented on Wolverine. The experiments gave Deadpool an extremely fast and powerful healing factor, making him almost immortal. The cost of these powers came with his body being scarred and his mind fractured. Deadpool has played almost every role possible in a comic book, being a villain, a hero, an anti-hero. Even at one point, he killed the entire Marvel Universe. He also has the unique ability of knowing he is a fictional character. The Destroyer isn't actually a person. It's an enchanted construct forged by Odin. Originally created to defeat the Celestials, once the Destroyer is activated, it becomes a walking powerhouse of strength and able to shoot an atom-erasing beam from his faceplate. On many occasions, the Destroyer has been awoken and used for evil purposes. Luckily, it's normally stopped by Thor. Dr. Doom's real name is Victor Von Doom, and he was born in the nation of Latveria. His mother was a witch who died trying to protect him, and Victor became obsessed with reviving his mother. As a young adult, Victor was contacted by the Americans and brought to America to help them make military weapons. However, behind the back of the American government, he made a machine which would be able to contact the spirit of his mother. Fortunately, when trying to use the machine, it malfunctioned and exploded, permanently scarring his face. Vowing to never be weak again, Victor traveled to the Himalayas and mastered sorcery, whilst also crafting himself his famous metal suit, which granted him enhanced strength, energy projectiles, and flight. He then returned to Latveria and overthrew their dictator and made himself the new ruler of Latveria. After all of this, Dr. Doom is constantly still in pursuit of power. By the way, if you want to get into reading Dr. Doom in the comics, I would really recommend the book called Books of Doom by Ed Brubaker. It's a great introduction to the character. Before becoming Dr. Octopus, his name was Dr. Otto Octavius, and he was a brilliant scientist. In order to help with his work as a nuclear physicist, he invented these tentacle-like arms that he could control with his mind, so that he could work with radioactive materials. One day, there was an accident in his lab. This accident caused his robotic arms to permanently fuse with his nervous system. This also caused damage to his brain, causing him to lose his moral integrity. Dr. Octopus quickly became rivals with Spider-Man, battling him, trying to prove that intellect and technology is better than instinct and morality. Doctor Strange is the Sorcerer Supreme of the Marvel Universe, meaning he is basically the guardian of reality itself. But before that, he was a wealthy and arrogant neurosurgeon. All of this changed when in a car crash he damaged his hands, meaning he could no longer be a neurosurgeon. Doctor Strange spent years trying to fix his hands, however nothing worked until he heard a rumor of someone called the Ancient One, who was in the Himalayas. He traveled to the Himalayas, and there he was shown magic that could fix his hands by the Ancient One. Upon seeing this though, Doctor Strange decided he wanted to learn magic, so he trained hard and eventually became Doctor Strange. He could now teleport, manipulate time, and even summon entities from different dimensions. Doombots are replicas of Doctor Doom designed to act like him and serve as his henchmen. They are also capable of self-repair, shooting energy blasts, and hacking technology, whilst also being sufficient in hand-to-hand combat. The Doombot, but chunky. Dormammu is an ancient mystical being and the nemesis of Doctor Strange. Dormammu is a Faltine, a race of entities made of mystic matter. Unlike the rest of his race, Dormammu wanted more power, so he left his original realm and went and conquered the Dark Dimension, and continues to conquer more and more dimensions. Dormammu is often seen as more powerful than Doctor Strange, being able to manipulate dimensions, warp space and time, and destroy matter. He is also practically immortal, especially in the Dark Dimension. Drax was originally a human called Arthur Douglas, who one day was driving his daughter home from an Elvis concert when suddenly Thanos attacked their car during a mission of his, killing him and his daughter. However, his story doesn't end there, because upon his death, the god Kronos took Arthur's soul and put it in a new artificial body. This was the birth of Drax the Destroyer. His new body had enhanced strength, durability, and only had one mission: kill Thanos. Electro has the ability to control and manipulate electricity. His real name is Max Dillon, and he got his powers when he was struck by lightning whilst repairing power lines. His body was supercharged, and from then on he was Electro, and he used his powers to rob banks. And eventually, getting sick of Spider-Man stopping him, he joined the Sinister Six. Electro was raised by a wealthy father in Greece, but one day, her father was killed in a hostage situation. Consumed by rage, Electro pursued and trained in martial arts, eventually becoming very skilled, which led her to become connected to the secretive organization, The Hand, who would put her skills to use as an assassin, usually across New York, leading her to encounter Daredevil. Elektra had a complicated relationship with Daredevil. Originally, they feel deeply in love, but the violent and criminal path that Elektra was on clashed with Daredevil's morals, causing them to have more of a love-hate relationship. This complicated relationship with Daredevil ended up with Elektra getting assassinated by Bullseye, devastating Daredevil. Nevertheless, Elektra was eventually revived by the Hand, but was changed mentally and spiritually. Emma Frost is a mutant who was born into a rich family. However, behind the fame and fortune, she was neglected by her family for being a mutant. Emma Frost's mutant power is Omega level telepathy and mind control, meaning she is one of the strongest mutants there is. Emma Frost used her powers to become a key figure in the Hellfire Club, a society of well people that influence politics and mutant affairs. Emma Frost took in her own students, similar to Professor X. However, these students were killed by Sentinels, causing Emma Frost to change her thinking and eventually join the X-Men to avenge her fallen students. Frost Giants are a race of giants who live in the icy plains of Jotunheim, which is one of the 9 realms in Norse mythology. They are a warrior race who were born into conflict and taught to do whatever they must to survive. The Frost Giants are led by their king Laufey, who has led them to battle against Asgard many times. To make things easier, I figured we could cover all of the Fantastic Four right here. The Fantastic Four was officially formed when Reed Richards built an experimental spacecraft to explore cosmic radiation. When the government refused to approve the launch, Reed launched it anyway, with him inside, along with his best friend Ben Grimm, his girlfriend Sue Storm, and her brother Johnny Storm. In space there was an accident, and they were blasted by cosmic rays that altered their DNA forever. When they landed back on Earth, they discovered they all had powers. Reed Richards became Mr. Fantastic, whose body became elastic and could stretch in any way and any way he wanted. Reed is also one of the smartest men in the universe, causing him to solve and cause many problems. Lastly, there's Johnny Storm, who became the Human Torch, who can now fly, set himself on fire, and shoot heat beams. Johnny is the team's youngest and cocky member, but he is also the most loyal. Ben Grimm became the Thing, a rock-like monster who is super strong and durable. However, his life became quite sad compared to the rest of the team, due to his appearance being altered permanently. Even his wife was scared of him and left him. Despite all of those hardships, he's still a man with a kind heart and will do whatever it takes to do the right thing. Sue became Invisible Woman, who can go invisible and make force fields. Along with that, she became Reed's wife, and is the emotional glue of the Fantastic Four. Galactus is one of the most powerful beings in the universe. But before he was Galactus, he was Galan from the planet Tar, which was in the universe that existed before the one we know, with Earth and such. However, in a cosmic event, the universe collapsed, but Galan was chosen by the sentience of the universe to become a cosmic being that was meant to sustain the balance of the universe. Galactus maintains the balance by eating planets, which also keeps his eternal hunger at bay. He doesn't just choose planets at random though, he has a herald do it for him, such as Silver Surfer or Thor. Gambit's real name is Remy LeBeau. He was born in New Orleans, but abandoned at birth because he had glowing red eyes, which is a common sign of mutation. He was then found and taken in by the Thieves Guild, who was a secret organization of criminals. Gambit became a valued member of the Thieves Guild as he grew older due to the fact he became a skilled thief, and he had mutant powers which gave him the ability to charge any object with kinetic energy, causing it to explode. His weapon of choice was playing cards, because they're easy to throw and not expensive. Gambit also has the ability called Hypnotic Persuasion, which subconsciously makes him very hard to resist or distrust. Lastly, he also has a collapsible bow staff for close combat. Gambit joined the X-Men to redeem himself after working with Mr. Sinister and being involved in the massacre of the Morlocks, who were a peaceful group of mutants who lived in the sewers of New York City. Once joining the X-Men, Gambit became romantically involved with fellow X-Man, Rogue. The romance was especially tragic due to Rogue not being able to touch anyone due to her powers. Gamora is a skilled warrior and key member of the Guardians of the Galaxy. But before all of that, she was just a little girl on the planet Zen Wobri, which was a peaceful world until it was destroyed by the Badoon, an evil race alien. As the lone survivor of her race, she was adopted by Thanos, who instead of showing her compassion and love, raised her with brutal training and manipulation. Under Thanos, Gamora mastered almost every style of combat in the galaxy. Eventually, as Gamora got older, she turned against Thanos and escaped from him, becoming his greatest fear, because he knew all his secrets. Eventually, Gamora crossed paths with the Guardians of the Galaxy and joined up with them, wanting to do good. Many different people have taken on the identity of Ghost Rider. However, the most famous and successful was Johnny Blaze. Johnny was a stunt driver who traveled the country performing. However, when his father got terminally ill, he was prepared to do anything to save him. He got so desperate that eventually he went to Mephisto, who was an evil demon, and traded his soul for the life of his father. Johnny's father did live, but Mephisto had rigged the deal that days later Johnny's father died in a terrible car accident, whilst Johnny became the host of the Spirit of Vengeance and could transform into the Ghost Rider. When transformed into Ghost Rider, he's a flaming skeleton covered in hellfire. Ghost Rider can burn souls, and he's immune to bullets, he can instantly heal, and is practically immortal. He also uses a flaming chain as a weapon, but his most important ability is his Penance Stare, which causes whoever it is used on to feel all the pain that person has caused others. Ghost Rider also has a motorcycle covered in flames called the Hell Cycle. He can travel up walls, across water, and even reach supernatural speeds. The Green Goblin's real name is Norman Osborn. He was a ruthless and cunning businessman and the owner of Oscorp. Behind his smart demeanor he was actually a paranoid man. This led him to making a makeshift super soldier serum to make himself almighty and powerful. The experiment worked, giving super strength, enhanced agility, and durability. However, the serum also made him monstrous and psychopathic. The Green Goblin armed himself with pumpkin bombs and a glider armed with missiles. Green Goblin's most notable moment is when he kidnapped Spider-Man's girlfriend Gwen Stacy and took her to the George Washington Bridge. During Spider-Man's attempt to get her back, she fell from the top of the bridge, and she died from Spider-Man's web suddenly catching her, which broke her neck. This moment cemented the Green Goblin as one of the cruelest villains not only in Spider-Man's history, but in Marvel's history. Unlike the original Green Goblin, who relies on technology, this timeline's version is a hulking monster. In the Ultimate Universe, Norman Osborn was a brilliant scientist working on something called the OZ serum, which was meant to create superhumans. He decided to test it on himself, and instead of giving him powers, he turned into a giant monster. In the Ultimate Universe, Green Goblin doesn't have a fancy suit. Instead, he has horns, clawed hands and feet, and growls instead of speaking. He also has super strength and can generate and throw fireballs. However, he still keeps his high intellect, which turns him into a deadly menace of Spider-Man. Groot is a sentient tree being from the species Flora Colossus, who come from Planet X. After leaving his planet, he was captured by space pirates and put in a cell with Rocket Raccoon, who eventually he broke out with, and from then on, they quickly became like brothers. Groot's species all have hardened larynxes, so they have to communicate through complex vibrations. However, Groot was able to develop a limited vocabulary, which allowed him to say, "I am Groot." And although it's only 3 words, they carry a deep meaning and can be full of complex emotions. Groot's powers is that he can regenerate his whole body as long as a little piece of him remains, and he also has super strength and can elongate his limbs and tendrils. Gwen Stacy is a very important character in Spider-Man's life. Gwen and Peter started dating in college, and Peter quickly fell in love with Gwen. This led to one of Spider-Man's most famous relationships. As mentioned before, Gwen Stacy eventually dies at the hands of Green Goblin, which changed Spider-Man completely. He became more mature in all aspects, especially as a hero, and going forward into his next relationships. Hawkeye's real name is Clint Barton, and after losing his parents at a young age, he and his brother joined a traveling circus, where Clint trained under 2 legendary performers, Trickshot and the Swordsman. They taught him archery and martial arts, but one day, Clint learned that his mentors were criminals and walked away from them, beginning his journey as a hero, and eventually joining the Avengers. Hawkeye has no superpowers, but his archery skills are so good that they might as well be superhuman. He also has an arsenal of different arrows, which can be used for every situation, such as an electric arrow, an EMP arrow, a net arrow, and a gas arrow. Havoc, or Alex Summers, is a member of the X-Men and is the brother of Cyclops. Havoc had a tragic childhood due to a plane crash where his parents died and he was separated from his brother. While Cyclops was found by Professor X, Havoc struggled through foster care, unaware of his mutant powers. One day though, they activated in a moment where he was being bullied at school. Initially, his powers were uncontrollable to the point where he ended up vaporizing the bully. Eventually, he was found by Professor X, and he learned to control his powers and joined the X-Men, even leading a team called X-Factor at one point. Havoc's powers are that he can produce energy blasts from his body, which can create an explosion, or a shockwave, or even obliterate his target. In order to control his powers, he is often equipped with a regulator divined by the Beast. Heimdall is the eternal guardian of the Bifrost, the bridge which connects Asgard to the 9 realms and many more places. As a guardian, his job is pretty simple: allow no threat to enter Asgard. Not only does Heimdall wield a massive sword, but he also has the unique ability of omniscient sight, meaning he can see everything from galaxies a million miles away to a person's exact location. Herbie is a robot made by Mr. Fantastic to assist the Fantastic Four. Herbie stands for Humanoid, Experimental, Robot, B-Type, Integrated, Technology. Herbie is not made for combat, but instead, he's made for analysis, data processing, and team communication. Although he's not a superhero, nor human, he is still considered to be a very trusted member of the Fantastic Four family. To the point, Mr. Fantastic trusts Herbie to babysit his children, and with the most important secrets of the Fantastic Four. Howard the Duck comes from the planet in a different dimension, where all the population are talking animals like him. During a cosmic disturbance, called the Nexus of All Realities, Howard was taken from his dimension and ended up on Earth. Soon after ending up on Earth, Howard's bad luck and insults caused him to get into lots of conflict with different Marvel villains. However, Howard doesn't have any real powers, but he is extremely sarcastic, grumpy, and trained in martial arts called Quack Fu. Hydra agents are soldiers that serve Hydra. What is Hydra? Well, Hydra is a terrorist organization that seeks world domination. The Hydra agents are primarily ex-criminals, but can also be extremist volunteers, or even people who were indoctrinated as a child. Hydra agents are normally equipped with high-tech weaponry and things like jetpacks. The Hulkbuster armor is a suit built by Iron Man, specifically designed to counter and defeat the Hulk, in case he ever loses control or turns evil. The Hulkbuster armor increases Iron Man's strength, durability, and power output. It also has a self-repair system, restraining nets, and sedative injectors. The Hulkbuster is only deployed as a last resort, since destruction normally follows wherever it's deployed. Iron Fist's real name is Danny Rand, and as a child, Danny was traveling through the Himalayas in search for the secret city of Kunlun with his family, when his mother and father fell off the mountain and died, leaving Danny all alone. Danny was eventually found and taken to Kunlun. There, he turned his heartbreak into motivation and trained non-stop to become the master of martial arts. In order to become an official master in martial arts, he had to defeat Shao Lao the Undying in a trial. Danny entered the trial and fought the dragon, defeated the dragon, and proved his worth. Apart from his great martial arts skills, he also has chi manipulation, which means he has heightened senses and accelerated healing. If he focuses his chi enough, he gets superhuman strength and is able to hit forces that can topple giants. After becoming a martial arts master, he returned to New York City and joined Heroes for Hire. Bobby Drake, also known as Iceman, is one of the X-Men's founding members. Initially the team's jokester, he eventually recognized his true potential as an Omega-level mutant. Iceman discovered his powers as a teenager when he accidentally froze a bully who attacked him. Terrified, his community turned on him, and Bobby was nearly lynched. But before he was, Professor X intervened and brought him to the X-Men. Iceman can freeze anything instantly due to the moisture in the air. Iceman can also transform his entire body into living ice, meaning he becomes almost immortal, since he is immune to physical harm and can reform broken pieces of himself. At full power, Iceman can create glaciers, freeze oceans, and become effectively immortal by shifting consciousness through ice. Jean Grey is one of the most powerful mutants in history. Jean discovered her powers at a young age when her best friend was hit by a car and died in front of her. The trauma awakened her telepathy, and she experienced her friend's pain and death as if it was her own. Her parents, terrified of her powers, sent her to Professor X, who helped her learn and control her powers. She became one of the first students at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters and a founding member of the original X-Men. Jean can read minds and move objects with her thoughts. She can also sense danger and even shut down brains. However, Jean Grey's most famous story is the Phoenix Saga, where she absorbs the Phoenix Force to save the X-Men from dying in space. The Phoenix Force is a cosmic entity of almost godlike power. At first, it transforms her into a cosmic hero, but the power corrupts her, and manipulation by villains like Magneto pushes her over the edge and she becomes the Dark Phoenix, becoming powerful enough to destroy the universe. Jean ultimately sacrifices herself to save the universe from her own power. Jameson is the loud, stubborn, and ruthless editor-in-chief at the Daily Bugle. He is dedicated to exposing corruption and holding powerful people accountable. But his greatest campaign and headlines are turning the public against Spider-Man. To Jameson, Spider-Man isn't a hero, but a mass menace. Jameson believes that Spider-Man being a vigilante encourages chaos and crime, and he thinks that he is hiding something. The ironic thing is that Peter Parker actually works for Jameson, and a lot of the times, Peter uses this to his advantage. Juggernaut's actual name is Kane Marko, and he is one of the strongest beings in the Marvel Universe, and a common enemy of the X-Men. Juggernaut grew up alongside his stepbrother Charles Xavier, and he was jealous of him, thinking he got more affection and better opportunities, making him resent Charles. Eventually, Charles went on to found his academy, but Juggernaut took a different path and joined the military. While serving in the military, he discovered a mysterious artifact, the Crimson Gem of Sidorak. This gem had ties to an ancient demon god, and when Juggernaut touched the gem, he transformed and gained the unstoppable might of Sidorak. This gave him amazing strength, making him able to destroy almost anything in his path. He also wears a helmet that blocks telepathy, making people like his brother Charles unstoppable. Making people like his brother Charles unable to stop him with their mental attacks, making Juggernaut one of the X-Men's toughest villains. Kingpin's real name is Wilson Fisk, and to the public, he is owner of Fisk Industries, a philanthropist and a respected member of the community, to the point that he eventually becomes mayor of New York City. But really, he is Kingpin, the most dangerous crime lord in New York and one of Spider-Man's and Daredevil's most deadly enemies. He controls an underground empire full of smuggling operations, assassins, and corrupt politics. Essentially, nothing happens in the city without his approval. Kingpin's one weakness is his wife Vanessa Fisk. She's the only person who treats Kingpin with kindness and isn't scared of him, so she influences many of Kingpin's decisions. Kingpin doesn't have any actual powers. He's incredibly strong due to most of his body mass being made entirely of muscle, hence why he has such a large frame. Kingpin's henchmen are enforcers of the criminal empire. They are usually former military, corrupt police, or just trained mercenaries. Most of them work for Kingpin because he either controls the territory or due to the fact that he offers them protection and pays very well. Kraven the Hunter was born into a wealthy Russian family that lost everything during a political revolt. This forced Kraven into hardship and poverty, and he was forced to learn skills of survival. He trained hard and eventually became a world-class hunter. He was strategic and a master tracker. Unlike many villains, Kraven does not hunt for money or for harm. He does it for honor and the thrill that comes with it. Kraven has been hunting harder and harder targets, but his greatest target is Spider-Man. Kraven believes if he successfully hunts Spider-Man, he will cement his name in history, becoming a living legend and achieving spiritual perfection. Kraven actually almost achieves this when he defeats Spider-Man and buries him alive and takes his place, pretending to be the Spider-Man, to demonstrate his superiority. However, Spider-Man eventually comes back and defeats him, but this still shows how dangerous Kraven is. This all happens in Kraven the Last Hunt, which I recommend everyone who's a Spider-Man fan should go read, since it's a classic story, and a great read overall. Anyway, not only is Kraven a skilled hunter, he also has powers that come from drinking a mysterious serum from the jungle called the Elixir of the Hunt. This elixir grants him the abilities of enhanced strength, speed, and agility. Curse was originally known as Algrim the Strong, and he was a powerful Dark Elf warrior. Before becoming Curse, Algrim served under Malekith and was loyal and devoted to his causes. Unfortunately, Malekith viewed Algrim as expendable. During a battle with Thor, Malekith ordered Algrim to cover his escape, so he went and fought Thor to buy time. However, during this, they both fell into a magma pit that was set up by Malekith. Thor obviously survived, but Algrim only survived due to the drive of his pure hatred for Thor and now Malekith. This officially transformed him into Curse. Curse's body was recovered and reshaped by the Beyonder, who made him more powerful and amplified his rage. Curse became an unstoppable monster with only one mission: destroy Thor and hunt down his previous master. Laufey is the king of the Frost Giants and the ruler of Jotunheim, although he's a leader that's feared by his citizens. Laufey has led his army of Frost Giants to war against Asgard for centuries, simply due to the fact that he despises Odin. Laufey is not just some tyrant warlord though, he is also responsible for one of Marvel's most infamous villains. You see, Laufey is the father of Loki. However, Loki was ashamed of Loki since he was small and frail compared to other Frost Giants. So, Loki decided to abandon him. But eventually during a battle with the Frost Giants, Odin found Loki and adopted him. In this moment, Asgard and even the future of the universe changed, and the little pride Loki had left for Loki became hatred. The leader, or Samuel Stones, is one of Hulk's most dangerous villains, but not because he's stronger than him, because of the opposite. He is smarter. The leader was also a scientist who was exposed to gamma radiation. However, instead of turning him to a hulking monster, his brain was mutated and became physically larger. But it also became more powerful than any human brain, giving him almost unstoppable intellect. The leader's powers are superhuman intelligence, the ability to read thoughts, communicate telepathically, and control people with weaker minds. The leader also surrounds himself with his followers, who are mutated with the gamma, and he also created some of his own personal robots. Lady Liberty is the name of the Statue of Liberty when it comes to life. Lady Liberty comes to life through magic spells, gamma radiation, or other supernatural events. Sometimes when she awakens to protect the city of New York and help heroes, but in other cases she is awoken because she's been mind controlled by villains and used as a weapon. Lady Liberty obviously has super strength, but she can also blast fire from a torch if necessary. Loki is the son of Laufey, who was mentioned before as the king of the Frost Giants. But at a young age, Laufey abandoned him, and Loki was adopted by Odin. Growing up, Loki always knew he was different, and he was always in Thor's shadow. This led to Loki becoming resentful and jealous of Thor. Loki knew he couldn't rival Thor's strength, so he sought power through intelligence and magic, eventually leading him to use the dark arts and trickery, officially becoming the god of mischief. Due to Loki's conflicted past, he does not always act as a villain, but instead sometimes a reluctant anti-hero. At times, he has even been ruler of Asgard, or a member of the Young Avengers. Being the god of mischief, Loki has a wide variety of powers, such as shape-shifting, telekinesis, telepathy, and due to him being a frost giant, he is even more durable and has a longer lifespan than most Asgardians. Magneto was born as Max Eisenhart, but then later changed his name to Eric Lehnsherr. Magneto's early life was full of tragedy due to him being Jewish in World War II. He was separated from his family and saw the horrors of the Holocaust. This shaped many of the beliefs he carries to this day. During these tragedies, his mutation began to manifest, and eventually, he could control anything metal or with metallic energy. Magneto met Professor X after World War II, and they quickly became lifelong friends. But at the same time, they were polar opposites. Whilst Professor X built his school, Magneto built his army, called the Brotherhood of Mutants, dedicated to stopping human oppression of the mutants, and to protect mutant kind by any means. Magneto isn't necessarily evil, or even a villain. His code just supersedes alliances, and he will do whatever necessary to protect his kind. Magneto acolytes are his cult-like followers, who come from many backgrounds. Some are former criminals seeking purpose, and others are mutants who are sick of being oppressed by humans. The acolytes believe that mutants are the superior race and should rule over humans. Magneto sends his acolytes to do his bidding, such as enforcement of mutant laws, destroying anti-mutant facilities, and protecting mutant refugees, normally through violence. Maria Hill grew up in a strict, military-like household, where her father was abusive and controlling. In order to escape this, she joined the military at a young age and quickly rose through the ranks. Eventually, she was recruited by S.H.I.E.L.D. for her exceptional combat and leadership skills. For a long time at S.H.I.E.L.D., she was Nick Fury's number 2, but eventually, when Nick Fury went underground, she was chosen to replace him and become the acting director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Malekith the Accused is the ruler of the Dark Elves of Svartalfheim, which is a world without hope and consumed by darkness. As a child, Malekith was forced into slavery and war. In order to survive, he mastered dark magic and became powerful enough to become the ruler of his realm. Due to his upbringing, Malekith is chaotic and cruel. His main goal is to plunge the Nine Realms into eternal conflict and darkness, which he actually succeeds at a couple times. For example, he unleashed eternal winter across the Nine Realms, and he was also the catalyst for one of Marvel's largest cross-realm events, the War of Realms. The Mandarin was born into a wealthy Chinese family and lived a lavish life. However, when the Mandarin got older, his family lost all their wealth due to a communist revolution in China. Because of this, the Mandarin became bitter and determined to reclaim his wealth and power at whatever cost. In order to regain some means of power, he ventured to the Valley of Spirits, where he found a wreckage of an alien spaceship. Inside were the 10 rings, which gave him the power he had been looking for, and better than that, making him one of the most powerful people on Earth. Each of the 10 rings grants a different ability, which are manipulating matter, energy blast, wind manipulation, fire generation and control, electricity control, gravity control, ice attacks, telepathy, and the ability to make literal black holes. Or he can just use a spectral ring, which will literally vaporize anyone he feels like. The Mandarin uses these rings to help in his attempts at becoming the most powerful man ever through world domination. Mary Jane grew up in an abusive home, and in order to mask that pain, she became a party girl. And as she got older, she eventually started going on a series of blind dates, where she ended up meeting Peter Parker. They immediately hit it off and started dating, eventually even moving in together. Mary Jane became Peter's emotional anchor. She truly understands Peter and Spider-Man. Even when she learns Peter is Spider-Man, she accepts the risk and stays with Peter. Mary Jane also refuses to be defined by her relationship, and continues to be ambitious in her career, becoming a fashion model, a journalist, and even at one point an actress. Overall, Mary Jane symbolizes the hope in Spider-Man and Peter's life. Mastermind's real name is Jason Wingard. He discovered his mutation at a young age. His mutation is that he can make people see illusions that feel real. To be exact, his powers allows him to fool all 5 senses, making people believe they are someone or someone else for as long as he wants. Using his power, he became a regular villain of the X-Men. Mastermind's defining moment was when he caused one of the biggest tragedies in X-Men history. He did this by targeting Jean Grey, better known as Phoenix. He used his powers to manipulate her and her emotions and made her believe she was a Victorian aristocrat, and also his wife. Then he made her battle the X-Men and defeat them, and in the end, made her take her own life. This shows truly how dangerous Mastermind can be. Sentinels are giant robots created by Dr. Bolivar Trask to detect, hunt, and exterminate mutants. Trask created Sentinels because he was terrified of mutants becoming the dominant race, and he believed the only way to stop this from happening was through the creation of the Sentinels. The Sentinels can detect mutants who are hiding in plain sight through their sensors which can see mutant DNA. They can also adapt to mutant abilities. For example, if a Sentinel is battling Iceman, the Sentinel would start using fire. The Sentinel model is always evolving. At first, there was just the classic massive robot, but now there are multiple models, including ones that look like humans and can act as sleeper agents in the mutant world. Before becoming MODOK, he was once an ordinary technician for AIM named George Talaton. AIM decided they wanted some sort of living computer who would be capable of processing data quicker than any machine, so they experimented on Talaton, enhancing his intellect and mutating him. The experiment worked, but at the cost of Tarleton's body transforming into a tiny body with a colossal head, officially turning him into MODOK. MODOK stands for Mental Organism Designed Only for Killing, which basically tells you all you need to know. MODOK has intellect that rivals that of Tony Stark's and Hank Pym's. He can also shoot mental blasts from the crystal in his forehead. These blasts can paralyze and even disintegrate people. Due to MODOK's body not being able to support himself, he has a chair called the Doomsday Chair, which is armed with missiles, shields, and most importantly, gives him the ability to fly. Moon Knight's real name is Mark Spector, and he's a vigilante who was cursed by an ancient Egyptian god. This happened when he was a Marine and he was on a mission that went wrong in Egypt, where his team betrayed him and left him to die at the feet of the statue of Khonshu, who is an Egyptian god of the moon and vengeance. Khonshu gave Mark a deal, which was he would live, but he had to spend the rest of his life as Khonshu's warrior. Mark accepted and was resurrected as Moon Knight. One of Moon Knight's most unique aspects is that he suffers from dissociative identity disorder, meaning he has multiple personalities inside this one body. There is his original personality, Mark Spector, who is a war-hardened Marine, Steve Grant, who claims he is a wealthy businessman, Jacob Lockley, a cab driver who is good at gathering information and interrogating, and then Moon Knight, the mass vigilante, and Mr. Knight, the detective side of Moon Knight who wears a suit. What separates Moon Knight from other vigilantes like Spider-Man and Daredevil is he doesn't really hold back. He is very violent, and lots of criminals wouldn't even consider him a hero. To them, he is more of a masked enforcer of the law. Moon Knight has mystical powers that are granted to him by Khonshu, such as resistance to mind control, occasional visions of the future, and he also has many gadgets, such as moon-shaped throwing blades, grappling hooks, truncheons, and in some iterations, he has a moon cult. Before she became Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers was the original Miss Marvel. Carol Danvers started off as a United States Air Force officer, but one day her life changed during an explosion that involved Kree technology. The explosion infused Carol's DNA with genetically enhancing Kree materials, giving her powerful abilities. After harnessing her powers, Carol officially adopted the mantle of Miss Marvel and became a protector of not only Earth, but many other planets in the universe. She also joined the Avengers later down the line. Miss Marvel's powers are super strength, light, energy projection, and super durability. Before becoming Mysterio, Quentin Beck was a talented special effects artist, who, despite his talent, saw his career stall out. Beck felt he was overlooked and underappreciated. He became bitter and let his ego take over, leading him to become a criminal, for the money and to prove how talented he truly was. So Mysterio was born, a villain who instead of having superpowers, used technology and illusion. Mysterio can create lifelike illusions and can disperse loads of gases such as knockout gas and hallucinogens from his suit. His greatest weapon though is his ability to manipulate someone psychologically. He also has a technological advanced suit which makes him immune to his own gases, has a holographic projecting system, and most importantly, his iconic fishbowl. Mystique's real name is Raven Darkholme. Little is known about her earlier life due to her mutant ability to shapeshift. Her ability made it even easier for her to erase her past and build multiple new identities. Mystique has lived for over a century due to her mutant biology, keeping herself young. To be more specific, Mystique's powers allow her to transform into any person, no matter their age or gender. Her transformation can fool DNA, retinal, and facial recognition scanners. Moving on, Mystique notably shares similar views to Magneto and wants to stop mutant oppression. This has led her to leading the Brotherhood of Mutants in the absence of Magneto. However, Mystique isn't purely evil. On many occasions, she has worked and fought alongside the X-Men. This has led to many complex relationships within the X-Men, such as Nightcrawler being her son, and she ended up making Rogue her adopted daughter one. Nightmare is one of Doctor Strange's oldest villains. He is the ruler of the Dream Dimension, where he can turn any human's own fear into his weapon. Nightmare is not human, nor anything else like that. Instead, he is a primal being born from the subconscious of a collective of sleeping minds. So basically, as long as someone is asleep, he will exist. Nightmare has the ability to enter any sleeping mind, twist nightmares into torture, and he can influence the emotions and memories of people. He is also immortal, and alongside all of that, he rides a supernatural Pegasus. Nick Fury started as a World War II soldier leading the Howling Commandos, but his instincts for strategy and survival pushed him into the world of intelligence. Given the Infinity Formula to slow his aging, Fury stayed in the game long enough to rise as director of S.H.I.E.L.D. The man who secretly manages superhumans, alien threats, and global security. Fury has no powers, but is an expert in all forms of combat and good with every weapon. Richard Rider was an ordinary school student in New York. But one day, everything changed, when a dying Nova Corps leader crash-landed on Earth after a battle with the villain Zor. In his final moments, the Nova Corps leader transferred his power to Richard, and from that moment on, Richard became Nova, the human rocket. Nova is a part of a larger intergalactic police corps with other powerful members like Nova Prime and Garthan Sal, better known as Nova Omega. However, the majority of the time, all of the Nova Corps is destroyed, and Nova is the sole survivor. Using his powers of energy shields and projection, and the entire knowledge database of the Nova Corps, Nova patrols the universe battling universal threats like the Skrulls and Annihilus. Pepper Potts began as Tony Stark's assistant at Stark Industries. She was organized and essential to the business. Tony eventually trusted her with all the company's secrets, and Iron Man's secrets, and even fell in love with her. Pepper became Tony's anchor, helping him through trauma and his addiction. Pepper's path to becoming the hero rescue started when she was near death and Tony implanted a device in her chest that saved her life. Worrying that he could lose Pepper again, Tony made a suit of armor like his for Pepper, but instead, her suit is built for defense and rescue, armed with defensive force fields and other things to do with rescuing people. Polaris is the daughter of Magneto and inherited his powers. Polaris grew up unaware of her powers and heritage. She lived a normal life until one day out of nowhere, her powers manifested and she could control magnetic forces, and, for some reason, got green hair. She then realized she was the daughter of Magneto, and this discovery pushed her into a life of struggle, where she was trapped between forging her own path and honoring her father, who shaped mutant history. Eventually, she chooses her own path and becomes a recurring member of the X-Men, and more importantly, X-Force. Luke Cage, also known as Power Man, was actually given the name Carl Lucas at birth, and grew up on the streets of Harlem. After being framed for a crime he did not commit, he was sentenced to prison for many years. Behind bars, he had to deal with injustice and corrupt cops. In order to try to shorten his sentence, he volunteered for an experimental procedure. The experiment went wrong and gave him super strength and super tough, nearly impenetrable skin. With his newfound powers, he broke out of prison, changed his identity and name to Luke Cage, and made a new life for himself as a hero for hire. Not out of greed, but out of the need to survive. Eventually, Luke became a respected hero and formed a superhero team called the Defenders, which consisted of Iron Fist, who was Luke Cage's best friend, and his future wife, Jessica Jones. Overall, Luke Cage just wants to defend people who can't defend themselves. Professor Charles Xavier, also known as Professor X, was born into wealth and privilege. However, unfortunately, his father died when he was young, and his mother remarried a cruel man. This also meant he got a new stepbrother, called Cain Marko, who, as mentioned before, grew up to be the Juggernaut. Soon in his life, though, Charles' mutation manifested, and he gained his powers of telepathy, and although he saw people were cruel, he still wanted to dedicate his life to understanding the mind and creating a future where mutants were not feared and could live in harmony with humans. Professor X is paralyzed from the waist down from varying injuries depending on what material you are reading. However, his powers of telepathy make him one of the strongest mutants ever. His abilities are heightened when he uses a technology called Cerebro, which amplifies his power to a godlike scale and allows him to read minds on a global and sometimes galactic level. As mentioned before, Professor X believes in and wants peace between humans and mutants. In order to pursue his goals, he founded Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, which not only was a safe haven for mutants, but also trained the superhero team, the X-Men, who were not seen as soldiers by Professor X, but more guardians of his dream of peace. Psylocke's real name is Betsy Braddock, who is famously the twin sister of Captain Britain. Betsy was born with the powers of telepathy. One day though, Betsy was kidnapped by a secret ninja organization called the Hand, who tortured her and placed her mind in a Japanese assassin called Quanon. This transformed her into the character everyone knows as Psylocke the Psychic Ninja. As mentioned before, Psylocke has telepathy, allowing her to read minds and project thoughts. On top of this, Psylocke can also create psionic weapons like knives and katanas, which she uses during combat. Real quick, this was probably the most confusing character research, since I didn't know at all that Psylocke wasn't originally a ninja. She's just a British woman trapped inside a ninja. Before becoming the Punisher, Frank Castle was a decorated US Marine, but his life was flipped upside down when his wife and kids were caught in the crossfire during a gang shootout in Central Park that was set up by the corrupt government in order to kill Frank. But Frank survived, and his family didn't. His family's killers went unpunished, and that was the day the Punisher was born, and he declared war on the criminal underworld. The Punisher doesn't have any powers. However, he is a master with any weapon you can think of, from handguns to grenade launchers, and he's also a master in hand-to-hand combat. Although the Punisher kills people, he is not necessarily a villain. He just thinks that killing is the only way justice will ever be served. This has led to him having many moral conflicts with the likes of Daredevil and Spider-Man, who he clashes with regularly on missions due to them normally pursuing the same villains and criminals. Pyro was originally an Australian journalist. However, when he eventually discovered his powers of pyrokinesis and fire manipulation, he decided not to use it for good, and was recruited by the Brotherhood of Mutants, becoming one of their main members. As mentioned, Pyro has the ability to manipulate fire, meaning he can shape it into whatever he wants, whether it's a giant fire monster or simply a massive flaming wall. He can do it. The one limitation is that fire has to be pre-existing. He deals with this by having built-in flamethrowers in his suit, and when he isn't suited up, he always carries around a lighter. Red Hulk's alter ego is that of General Thaddeus Ross, a military commander who was obsessed with bringing down the Hulk due to General Ross seeing the Hulk as a threat to national security. Obviously, General Ross wasn't powerful enough to bring the Hulk down on his own, so he made a deal with some sketchy militia group and underwent an experiment that turned him into the Red Hulk, and he was finally able to go toe-to-toe with the original Hulk. Unlike the original Hulk, Red Hulk retained General Ross's intellect, meaning he can plan tactically and is also a weapons expert. On top of that, the angrier Red Hulk gets, the hotter he becomes. He can become so hot that he can melt metal, and in some iterations even shoot concentrated heat beams from his eyes. Although Red Hulk started out as a villain, he eventually becomes an anti-hero, and is in teams like the Thunderbolts, and even the Avengers for a bit. Red Skull was born as Jonas Schmidt, and he had a very tragic childhood, with his mother dying during childbirth, and because of this, his father tried to kill him. But when his father failed, he instead took his own life. This left Johan to grow up abandoned, alone, and full of rage. Fate would have it that Johan would meet Adolf Hitler when he stayed at a hotel Johan was working at. Seeing Johan's potential, Hitler took him in and trained him personally, turning him into the ultimate German war general. Johan broke free from Hitler's control and formed Hydra. Under his leadership, Hydra became a deadly threat to the world, and around this time is also when Yona became Red Skull, because in an attempt to get more powerful, he used an experimental version of the super soldier serum on himself. That obviously didn't work correctly and turned his body red and skeletal-like. Red Skull's reign of terror in World War II came to an end after he was stopped by Captain America. However, although he was defeated then, he survived and decades later re-emerged to wreak havoc on the world. Alexei Stichevich was a Russian criminal looking to escape poverty, when a group of scientists offered him money and power. Without a second thought, Alexei accepted. The scientists experimented on him and bonded nearly indestructible rhino-like polymers to his skin, and enhanced his strength with gamma treatments. When the experiments were finished, Alexei was officially reborn as the Rhino. The Rhino has superhuman strength, durability, and most importantly, he has a deadly charge attack. Although at first the Rhino loved his newfound powers, eventually he tried to reform, find a cure, and live a normal life. However, he is brought back to a life of violence when he was forced to team up with Spider-Man to stop Kraven. In the end, Rhino feels like he can never escape the cycle of violence, so he teams up with Dr. Octopus and tries to destroy the planet. Luckily, his plan was foiled by Spider-Man. Rocco wasn't born. Instead, he was engineered. On the planet Half-World, scientists were performing experiments on helpless animals in an attempt to make intelligent caretakers for the planet's mentally ill. Rocket survived the experimentation, eventually rebelling and escaping. In order to survive, Rocket became a bounty hunter. And in one of his many adventures, Rocket was captured and jailed. He was put in a cell with Groot, and they quickly made a bond and became great friends. Eventually, they escaped together, and later, they joined the Guardians, when Star-Lord recruited them for a mission where they had to stop Phalanx from destroying a planet. Rocket has no powers, but he is a master tactician and weapons expert. And for some reason, he also has a thing for robotic limbs. Ronan is a high-ranking member of the Kree, who are one of the most powerful alien races. He belongs to a group of warriors called the Accusers, who are responsible for enforcing Kree law and punishing criminals and traitors. Ronan rose the ranks and eventually became the Supreme Accuser, the Kree's ultimate judge. As a Kree warrior, Ronan has super strength and is an expert at hand-to-hand combat, but his real power comes from his hammer, called the Universal Weapon. The hammer can fire energy blasts, manipulate matter, freeze targets, and even open dimensional rifts. Roxxon guards the security of the Roxxon Energy Corporation, who are one of the most corrupt companies in the Marvel Universe, with them being involved in weapons deals and other things like illegal experiments. Since Roxxon deals in some sketchy stuff, most of the guards are mercenaries and ex-criminals, who will keep their mouths shut. Sabretooth's real name is Victor Creed. His mutation manifested very early in his life, and twisted his instincts, making them more animalistic, and amplified his cruelty. Sabretooth embraced his instincts and allowed it to shape him into a monster. Sabretooth's mutation gives him a healing factor like Wolverine, and gives him animal-like razor-sharp claws, and tracking abilities like enhanced smelling and hearing. Sabretooth is most notably Wolverine's greatest enemy. Their relationship is centuries long, fueled by hatred, and connected through the Weapons X program. Not only has Sabretooth fought Wolverine, but he has also killed people Wolverine has loved, and even tricked him into killing his own son. Before becoming Sandman, Flint Marko was a low-level crook who was eventually put in prison. While escaping from that prison, he hid in a nuclear testing site, which activated while he was in there, and ended up fusing his body with a nearby pile of sand, officially transforming him into Sandman. Sandman can turn his whole body into sand and strip through small cracks, but he can also transform his body parts into things like giant hammers or fists. And if there's enough sand around, he can become a giant sand monster. These guys are literally just walking piles of sand that Sandman control. Jennifer Walters was a skilled lawyer and, notably, a cousin of Bruce Banner. After being shot by criminals, she was in need of a blood transfusion, and the only donor available was her cousin, Bruce Banner, or better known as the Hulk. The blood transfusion saved her life. However, since it was Bruce Banner's gamma-irradiated blood, she could now transform into She-Hulk, giving her incredible strength. Unlike the original Hulk, when she transforms, she is still herself and does not become filled with rage. On top of that, She-Hulk is much more agile than the other Hulks, sometimes giving her the upper hand in battle. SHIELD agents are highly trained operatives who work for SHIELD. Every agent undergoes grueling physical, tactical, and psychological training, preparing them to operate in scenarios most humans would not survive. Most agents, although they don't have powers, find themselves working amongst superheroes and aliens on the daily. Shocker's real name is Herman Schultz, and he was an engineer that struggled to find success, and in order to make money, he turned to a life of crime, using his engineering skills to make gauntlets that could produce powerful shockwaves, capable of toppling small buildings and stopping enemies from getting close. He also wears a suit that protects himself from his own shockwaves. Although it looks stupid, it can be pretty effective, especially when robbing banks. Silver Samurai was born the son of Shingen Yoshida, a powerful Japanese crime lord and head of the Yoshida clan. His father trained him in martial arts and swordsmanship, and eventually he donned a high-tech suit and became the Silver Samurai, acting as the Yoshida clan's bodyguard and enforcer. The Silver Samurai is a mutant. However, his mutation is not very obvious. His mutation allows him to channel faster than light particles through objects. He uses this ability to charge his sword with these particles, allowing him to cut through metal and things like force fields. On top of that, his suit also makes him bulletproof and gives him enhanced strength. Before becoming the Silver Surfer, his name was Norrin Rad, and he lived peacefully on the planet Zen-La. One day though, Galactus arrived to consume his home planet, but Norrin made a sacrifice. In order for his planet's survival, he would become Galactus' herald. Galactus accepted and spared Zen-La, but Norrin was now his, and would be forced to search for more planets for Galactus to consume. On top of that, Norrin officially became the Silver Surfer when Galactus granted him the power of Cosmic, one of the most powerful forces in the Marvel Universe. Not only did this make him a super powerful man, but it also turned his skin into an indestructible silver alloy. And then he was also given his indestructible surfboard, which allows him to travel through space at the speed of light. This Spider-Woman's real name is Jessica Drew, and she had a tragic childhood. As a young girl, she was terminally ill due to exposure to uranium. To save her, her father, who was a scientist, injected her with a serum made from spider DNA and placed her in a life support chamber for many years. When she finally awoke, she had spider-like powers similar to Spider-Man's, but she also had gaps in her memory, and she was eventually found by Hydra and brainwashed by them. Hydra made her work for them, but eventually she broke free of the brainwashing and became a hero. What separates Spider-Woman's powers from Spider-Man's is that her webs can shock people, and she has the ability to manipulate the pheromones around her body, allowing her to make people fear her or even attracted to her. Squirrel Girl, or Doreen Green, discovered as a child she could communicate with and control squirrels. As a kid, she also dreamed of becoming a superhero. So, that's exactly what she did. She became one. Without any of that normal superhero tragedy or hardship, she is simply just a girl who wants to help out. Not only can Squirrel Girl control squirrels, but she also has abilities linked to them, like enhanced strength, claws, and a big fluffy tail. Another thing is that Squirrel Girl has earned the nickname the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl due to her beating many of Marvel's most powerful villains, like Thanos and Galactus, technically making her one of the most powerful characters in Marvel Universe. Stan Lee is one of the legendary co-creators of Marvel Comics, and alongside people like Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, he pioneered the comic book industry and created some of the most iconic superheroes and characters of all time, like Spider-Man, most of the Avengers, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four. Star-Lord, or Peter Quill, grew up on Earth and was raised by a single mother. However, tragically, when he was 10 years old, she was killed by aliens. Peter witnessed all of this, However, no one believed him, so he was sent to an orphanage. As an adult, he joined NASA's astronaut program due to his desire to find the aliens that killed his mother. It was at NASA where he stole a cruise ship that NASA was hiding from the public. Once he got to space in his ship, the ship malfunctioned and he was stranded. But luckily, the Ravagers found him. The Ravagers are space pirates led by Yondu. Yondu took Peter under his wing and taught him everything there is to know. Eventually though, Peter got sick of being a pirate and wanted to do some good. So he left the Ravagers and went off on his own journey, calling himself Star-Lord. It was on this journey where Star-Lord met his father, Jason, who was an evil ruler of his own planet. Jason asked for Star-Lord to become the prince of the planet and stay with him. However, Star-Lord said no and instead liberated the planet from his father. Star-Lord's journey came to an end when he formed the Guardians of the Galaxy in the war against Fanlax. And from then on, instead of playing solo, he continued on with what has now become his family. Superior Spider-Man is Dr. Octopus inside the body of Peter Parker, acting as a much more dangerous Spider-Man. This happened because Doc Ock was on the brink of death, so he used his genius to make a machine that caused him to switch minds with Spider-Man. This meant that Peter died in Dr. Octopus's failing body, and Otto lived on in Peter's young, powerful Spider-Man body. However, before Peter died, he made Otto experience and feel all his memories, responsibility, and compassion. This caused Otto to declare that he would become much better than Peter ever was as Spider-Man. Superior Spider-Man was a much more violent and ruthless Spider-Man, killing lots of Spider-Man's rogue gallery, including the Sinister Six, with ease. However, eventually the Green Goblin launched a massive scale attack on New York, and Otto realized there were certain things that he could not stop without the innate heroism of Peter Parker. So, he erased his own consciousness, effectively killing himself, and allowing Peter Parker to return as the true Spider-Man. Another notable feature of the Superior Spider-Man was that he ditched Spider-Man's traditional suit for a high-tech suit which had 4 mechanical spider arms. The Skrulls are an alien race known for espionage and infiltration. However, they were constantly thwarted by the Fantastic Four. So in an attempt to get the upper hand on them, an elite Skrull soldier called Colt was enhanced with cosmic energies, granted him all 4 of the Fantastic Four's powers, officially making the first Super Skrull. These are scientists who were messing around with the Venom symbiote and paid the price, and are now controlled by the evil Venom symbiote. Imagine what I said before, but with some extra drip. Storm's real name was Aurora Monroe. Storm was born in New York to a Kenyan princess and an African photojournalist. When she was young, her family moved to Cairo, but there tragedy struck when their home was destroyed by a falling plane bomb that killed her parents instantly. After escaping the ruins, she survived on the streets of Cairo as a skilled thief. Later though, she felt a spiritual calling and wandered south across Africa, where her powers of weather manipulation emerged naturally. Among the African tribes, her ability to bring down rain to dry lands earned her a reputation as a goddess of the weather. Eventually, Professor X caught wind of this. He found her and brought her to the X-Men, helping her channel her powers for a greater purpose. Not only can Storm control the weather, but she can also project lightning and control the wind, allowing her to fly at incredible speeds. Storm also notably became the Queen of Wakanda after marrying Black Panther, although they eventually divorced. Overall, Storm is an Omega-level mutant, making her one of the most powerful mutants ever. On top of that, she is a great leader and powerful woman. Taskmaster was once a SHIELD agent with the ability to mimic anything he watched. To enhance this ability, he took an experimental drug, which unlocked his full potential. However, the side effects were that he lost his memories, such as who his family was, and instead they were replaced with fighting skills and combat moves, slowly turning him into the ultimate weapon. Now that he could no longer make lasting memories, he dedicated his life to crime and working for whoever paid the most. Due to his unique ability, he can replicate any superhero's moveset, and is a master with all weapons, including a bow and shield, due to people like Hawkeye and Captain America. Taskmaster is one of the very people that can go toe-to-toe with many of the Avengers. Toad's real name is Mortimer Tonby, and he was born with physical mutations that caused him to be mocked and rejected by society. Because of this, Toad developed low self-esteem and a desperate need for acceptance, which made him an easy target for Magneto to manipulate and recruit. So eventually, Toad joined the Brotherhood of Mutants. Toad's mutant abilities are, he can jump super high and leap great distances and move faster than most humans. But his most distinguishing feature and part of his mutation is his frog-like tongue. which obviously what made him feel insecure about himself. He can use his tongue to grab objects, tie up enemies, or pull down surfaces towards him. Thor is the Asgardian god of thunder, and one of the most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe. He is the son of Odin, the All-Father of Asgard. Thor was born a warrior prince raised to believe in strength, honor, and battle. However, because of Thor being arrogant and reckless, Odin banished Thor to Earth and stripped him of his powers to teach him humility. Eventually, Thor proved himself worthy and regained his abilities, and then embraced his role as both a god and protector of Earth. Thor wields the enchanted hammer Mjolnir, which grants him powers to control lightning and thunder, as well as the ability to fly and manipulate massive amounts of energy. Thor possesses godlike strength, durability, and longevity, allowing him to battle cosmic threats and gods. Thor is also a founding member of the Avengers, and often acts as Earth's defender against threats from Asgard, other realms, and the wider universe. Union Jack, whose real name is James Montgomery, is basically Britain's version of Captain America, meaning in World War II, he was on the front lines fighting for his country. At some point, he even found himself fighting alongside Captain America against Hydra in a team called the Invaders, which consisted of Union Jack, Captain America, Namor, and the original Human Torch, the android one. Union Jack does not have any traditional superpowers, and instead relies on his peak human conditioning, military training, and combat skills. He is highly skilled in hand-to-hand combat, knife fighting, firearms, and tactical warfare. In some versions though, he gains enhanced strength and stamina through blood transfusion or experimental treatments, but he is mainly portrayed as a highly trained human
The Venom
soldier.
symbiote is an alien organism from a species called the Clintar. They are creatures that bond with their host and enhance their abilities. The symbiote once bonded with Spider-Man. However, after realizing that the symbiote was controlling him and amplifying his anger, Spider-Man got rid of the symbiote. The symbiote felt betrayed and rejected. Luckily, it found Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock was a disgraced journalist whose life was falling apart because of the story Spider-Man exposed as fake. Eddie hated Spider-Man, just like the symbiote did, so it was a perfect match. The symbiote bonded with Eddie and they became Venom, and were on a path to destroy Spider-Man. Venom has similar strength to the Hulk, can generate tendrils, webs, and think like S.H.I.E.L.D. Over time, Venom became less of a villain due to the symbiote becoming more human due to Eddie Brock's influence, leading to Venom eventually becoming an anti-hero. Viper, also known as Madame Hydra, was an orphan who was raised and trained by Hydra, turning her into a master assassin who quickly rose the ranks and became one of Hydra's most vital members. Viper has no superpowers, but she is a master with weapons like knives and guns. And she also uses lots of poison in her arsenal, such as poison-tipped darts and poison gas, hence the name Viper. Before becoming the Vulture, Adrian Toomes was a genius inventor and engineer, but after discovering that his business partner had secretly stolen money from him, Toomes snapped. Enraged and seeking revenge, he used an experimental flight harness that he had been working on, which was basically a suit powered by electromagnetic technology that granted him flight, speed, and strength. But most importantly, it was bright green and made him look like a bird. The Vulture started robbing banks and doing petty crimes to make money, but eventually he would join the Sinister Six in order to try and defeat Spider-Man. War Machine's real name is James Rhodes, but people call him Rhodey, and he's a decorated US Air Force pilot and a close friend of Tony Stark. When Tony was building more Iron Man suits, he made one especially for Rhodey because he trusted him due to Rhodey taking over as Iron Man when Tony's alcoholism was really bad. This suit was much more equipped for military missions that Rhodey went on. The suit had missiles, machine guns, and a stealth system. Whilst Iron Man's is a sleekly designed suit built to handle the superpowered and supernatural, War Machine is like a tank and built to stop human threats. Janet Van Dyne became the Wasp when her father was murdered by aliens that he summoned. In order to stop the aliens, she sought help from Hank Pym. Hank eventually grew a liking to Janet, revealed to her that he was Ant-Man, and inspired Janet to become the Wasp. Together, her and Hank became the Ant-Man and the Wasp, the iconic hero duo. The Wasp is also one of the core members of the Avengers. She even was the one to come up with the name. The Wasp has similar powers to Ant-Man, such as shrinking, but she can also fire energy bursts from her wrists and fly using her insect-like wings. Whiplash is an Iron Man villain, and probably only in this game because of his Iron Man 2 movie appearance, because in the comics, he's just some mobster's bodyguard with electric whips that constantly gets his ass whooped by Iron Man. The Wizard was a child prodigy named Bentley Whitman, who became wealthy and famous through inventions and public text exhibitions. But admiration wasn't enough for him. He he wanted to be known as the smartest man on Earth. But when the Fantastic Four stole the spotlight, his jealousy turned to obsession. He reinvented himself as the villain the Wizard, in an attempt to get rid of the Fantastic Four and put the spotlight back on him. The Wizard has no superhuman abilities, but his genius allowed him to make gadgets like anti-grav discs and his battle armor, which can generate force fields, shoot energy blasts, and give the ability of flight. The Wizard also created the villainous counterpart to the Fantastic Four, the Frightful Four, which includes him, the Trapster, Sandman, and the Claw. To this day, the Wizard is still one of Mr. Fantastic's fiercest rivals. Well, that does it. That's all 169 characters on the main roster at LEGO Marvel Superheroes 2 explained in under a minute. With that said, I really hope you guys enjoyed the video and learned something, because this video took ages to make. If you did like it, make sure to like and sub, so I know. Also comment if you want more videos like this. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and a wonderful Christmas.